Please sit down. Good morning, everybody. Today's evidence will be live streamed with a 15-minute delay. Those with mobile devices may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed. Since the event that they're reporting, they may not be used for recording or photography. Yes. Yesterday, I was asking you about the note believed to be prepared by HN2 Andy Coles and in the Tradecraft Manual.
Yes.
And I think it's right that everybody should be reminded that that was done during your time as TCI in 1995 and not before you started. And I want to give you the opportunity of reflecting and answering again, if you want to, whether or not you think you read it or didn't, or what your answer is about its contents.
It would seem to me that anything that was written during my tenure,
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if I hadn't seen it. Now, I think you indicated there was an anomaly between that and me saying I hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
Certainly as presented to me at the beginning of my statement taking, I genuinely did not recall having seen it. I think what I was trying to say to you yesterday, and in answer to you this morning, is that it would seem unlikely. I genuinely did not remember seeing it, but it seems unlikely for me. I'd be disappointed if I hadn't, during my time, read anything that came across
Yes.
my desk.
If you had seen it and had absorbed its contents, what would you have done about it?
And I think you're probably highlighting the statement that Andy Coles had made about having some, I forget what the wording is, but
Having a disastrous
a
fleeting
disastrous fleeting relationship. Again, sir, I'm now answering that question today, trying to put my head back to then. I can't say that I reacted to that. I genuinely can't remember any of that. But if I were to see that today, and of course this is hindsight, isn't it? I would perhaps have I would take some issue about what is meant. What does he really mean by that? Disastrous. What does he mean to have some try to have some sort of close relationship, but make certain that it doesn't work? I can't read now what was in his mind.
So the answer, I think, is that you may well have read it, that if you had read it, you did not do anything about it.
That would appear to be the case.
Yeah.
I have to say, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Can I draw your attention to the annual report of 1993/4? It's behind tab B75 MPS 0722654, please. So this will be the annual report that was drafted by HN86, your predecessor, in the run-up to you joining as manager in the April of 1994. And would this be a document that you would read in preparation for taking over management?
So, yes, I would. Yeah.
Page 22 of the document, please. Paragraph 2.1 talks about the Stephen Lawrence murder. And I'll just give you a moment to read that paragraph.
Thank you.
Although it doesn't say it here, was it recognised at the time of this report that this was a racist murder? So this is going on for a year after his death.
I can only say I assume that is what it's trying to say, perhaps.
And did Special Branch see that as a racist murder?
I would have
Was that
thought
your
so.
recollection?
I would have thought so.
It describes an increasingly violent campaign against racist aggression which commenced after the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Now, it's obviously a very significant part of the operations of SDS at the time under HN86's management. But when you read this, did you take it that HN86 was talking about the Stephen Lawrence campaign that started after Stephen Lawrence's death? Or was he talking about the wider campaign against racism? Can you recall what he was suggesting was becoming an increasingly violent campaign against racist aggression?
I don't think it's specifically, just reading it here, I don't think it's specifically identifying the Stephen Lawrence campaign. I think, as it says, increasingly violent campaign against racist aggression, which certainly commenced. That probably the Stephen Lawrence murder was a catalyst for the increased violent campaigning.
Was it? Can you recall at all what your understanding was taking over management of the SDS at the time? There's a suggestion that there's an increasingly violent campaign against racist aggression. What was it that you were trying then to manage with your UCOs? What were they targeted towards to report on?
This would have been standard SDS activity in relation to any of the extremist groups that would use not only the Stephen Lawrence issue, but any other issues that might be arising to foment or to use that campaign and other campaigns as a means of attracting greater influence to their own groups, and in some cases, in the extreme cases, by fomenting violent disorder on the streets.
We know that there had been campaigns for a long time prior to Stephen Lawrence's death by organisations like the Anti-Nazi League, the ARA, YRE, the Youth Against Racism in Europe, and we've heard evidence from people like Lois Austin in the course of this tranche, who'd been campaigning for years against racist attacks in the area. But it doesn't seem like this note or this report is relating to organisations as such that have been campaigning non-violently for years in relation to Stephen Lawrence. It looks like it's relating to the campaign itself, the Stephen Lawrence campaign, because it says that it was a bandwagon which attracted all the major left-wing groups. It does look like this paragraph itself is focused on the Stephen Lawrence campaign and describing that as an increasingly violent campaign. Is that reflective of your understanding of the Stephen Lawrence campaign when you took over management? Would you say that's a fair description first, a fair interpretation of that paragraph?
You're asking me, actually, I have to say, to make a comment on a report that I didn't write. And my understanding would have been, I think, would have been that there was always the propensity for anti-fascist groups to foment some form of activity, probably against the BNP itself. But our sole task has always been to ensure that we get enough intelligence to prevent some of the activities, the activities of violence on the streets. I'm sorry, I'm a little trying to work out what you're trying to ask of me anyway.
We've heard lots of evidence about the Stephen Lawrence campaign, and including from Baroness Lawrence herself, that the campaign was not violent in any way. In fact, they demanded that those groups that were supporting them did not promote violence, and they steered away from any groups that they thought that would cause disorder. The Stephen Lawrence family were not at Welling, and there's no suggestion at all that the family or their campaign was violent. The question I'm asking is, ultimately, is this paragraph misrepresenting the Stephen Lawrence campaign in the annual report of the SDS?
I don't read that read it in that way. I really don't. I just see that what it's saying is, and you've indicated, and I will agree, that the actual campaign, and particularly run by the family, was never intended in any way to become violent. It was a campaign to get justice, as we talked yesterday about what had happened to Stephen Lawrence and those involved, and what the police had done about the investigation. Now that's what we'd always thought. I'd always thought, and I believe SDS had always thought. That's what the campaign was about. But I always go back to our raison d'etre is to ensure that, irrespective of how peaceful the Lawrence family were towards having a campaign like this, the fact remains that other extreme left-wing organisations would have used that campaign, as they've done with many other campaigns, to gain some notoriety for themselves, some additional support for themselves, and, if necessary, to foment some form of activity. And it was marked, as it says here, by a riot in Welling in May. I will reiterate, this is not targeted against the campaign and the family. It's all those around it who would misuse it.
Would there be any incentive to represent the campaign in this increasingly violent way? Because it would provide a reason then for the SDS to be reporting on it. It would bring it within the SDS remit.
It's not the campaign.
It's
any activity that we can see taking place on the streets which would start to cause serious public disorder, that's our responsibility, to try and gain that intelligence.
Was there any suggestion that a campaign that was fighting for black rights, black people involved in it, it was a black family justice campaign, that was in any way more of a threat of public disorder than it was in reality? It was a misrepresentation.
I don't think it's a misrepresentation. I think there is always a concern that certain campaigns will attract people who are wanting to misuse the campaign. However lawful the campaign itself and justified, there will be people who will misuse it. And that has always been, as far as I'm aware, the role of SDS and Special Branch, to gain intelligence to help, hopefully, prevent serious disorder on the streets.
Were you aware at the time of taking over management that there were any corporate concerns in the Met Police Service about the Lawrence campaign regarding the potential for reputational damage?
No, not in the way that, no, definitely not. But I'm sure, as previously heard, and I tend to accept, there was a concern even amongst police officers that Mrs. Lawrence, or Baroness Lawrence now, had highlighted her concerns about the poor investigation of the crime. And that's the sort of conversation, if anything, I would have been involved in or heard. I'm not saying I was involved in conversation, but it would have been something passing comment almost, I suspect. Can't remember very specifically, but yes, when we hear from Mrs. Lawrence her concerns, some police officers think, wow, I wonder what did go on. How well investigated was the murder?
Were you aware of any pressure on HN86 or Chief Superintendent Bob Potter from senior managers to provide intelligence about the campaign?
No, I was not aware.
Was there any pressure on you when you took over?
Absolutely not.
Was it still seen as a significant part of the SDS operation, the Stephen Lawrence campaign and the support groups around it?
Forgive me, it is a while ago now, but I'm still come back to what I said. If there was an opportunity if there was something happening about the campaign, supporting the campaign, that would have been an opportunity for those people who decide to misuse the campaign. So then we would have still taken an interest, yes. But we weren't, as far as I can recall, not recall, I can say, never asked to target the campaign itself.
Did Peter Francis ever speak to you about any tasking concerns around the Lawrence campaign?
No.
You'll be aware of Peter Francis's allegations about racist language being used by people within the SDS, and in particular HN86 using racist tropes, such as the monkeys are organising, being led by the rings in their noses, referring, it seems, to the involvement of an experienced solicitor, Imran Khan, now King's Counsel. Did you ever hear racist language being used in the SDS, in particular with regard to the Stephen Lawrence campaign or those involved in it?
Emphatically, no.
Did you hear any racist language being used in the wider special branch?
No.
Did you ever hear a racist language being used or derogatory language being used in relation to Dwayne Brooks, who was Stephen's friend, who was there on the night of the attack, and he was attacked by the group as well?
Emphatically, no.
As we touched upon yesterday, you were a close family friend of Bob Potter. Were you aware around that time, October 1993, of a racist incident that he was involved in, which led to his retirement from Special Branch?
I did say yesterday, and I'll repeat, Bob Potter was a family friend over time, and I am somewhat disappointed now that this inquiry continues to bring up the fact that somebody who was so ill and has subsequently died, accusing him of some racist activity. Now, so that's my stance about Bob Potter. And also I feel for his family, because every time this comes up, it must be something else for them to think about, their husband, father. However, let me also say, you asked me about, did I hear about it? I heard there had been an incident. Yes, of course I did. And I heard that he'd gone into a club. I can't remember exactly what was told, but I'd heard about it. And deeply saddened by it.
Had you heard him using racist language yourself in Special Branch?
No, not racist language. No, not at all.
The illness that he had, was it something that caused him to use racist language?
Forgive me, I've not heard him use racist language, but he was very ill towards the end.
Had he been suffering for some time before that incident in October 1993?
Look, Bob was a very ebullient type of character. He was quite a leader, actually. May I say he was a leader not only professionally at work, but he was a great leader on the rugby field as well. He was a great guy in that respect. So at what point, being a friend as well, at what point would I have started to see any deterioration in his health? And I'm uncertain because I'm not a medical person, did I notice some changes? He went on a course to Quantico, I believe, and came back even more buoyed up about his work and his activity as a senior officer. I don't know if that was where I saw a change. But
Had you ever heard of the name that was apparently used for him, Potty Bob, and how did you interpret that?
Well, I have heard that expression. Now, again, forgive me, I don't know that I heard that expression while I was serving with him or after he'd left, or whether I've heard that expression here. But it depends what is meant by potty. To my mind, someone perhaps has some sort of mental illness, perhaps. I don't quite, because I think someone's suggesting it means he has some sort of, which has been referred to as potty mouth, like it's a use of bad language. My interpretation on hearing that was that he was being identified as somebody who was really very unwell.
The allegation that Peter Francis makes is at paragraph 161 of his statement to this inquiry. He says he was known as Potty Bob for having a potty mouth, but also for being mentally unstable. When he came to the SDS meetings, he behaved like he was one of the lads. He would drink a lot and always very loud and was always very loud and indulged in casual racism and sexism. Knowing what you know about Mr. Potter, do you consider that it might be true, whatever the cause, that he used racist language or sexist language in the work environment?
I'm going to say not in my presence. I cannot account for what Peter Francis is saying. You know my view of him.
Trevor Morris is somebody that you managed for a time. He says at paragraph 23 of his witness statement that he experienced numerous incidents of racism as a police constable, both from the public and within the Met. He was a black officer, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
I'd like to look, please, at his witness statement, UCPI 35076, page 110, please. It's about his reporting on justice campaigns. And you've addressed this at paragraph 400 of your witness statement. I think you've seen these extracts and some of his reports.
Are you going to be showing me something?
I think so. In fact, we perhaps don't need to go to HN78's witness statement, but if I can take you to, this is where he talks about the different reports that he made in relation to justice campaigns. It's right, isn't it, that there were numerous reports on justice campaigns from HN78. in the time that you were his manager?
I suspect that's probably correct. I mean,
If we can go to one of those, MPS 0245170. It's a report dated the 9th of June 95. And if we can scroll down to the bottom, please. It says superintendent at the bottom, and it's a special branch report. Is this the sort of report that you would draft for special branch or feed into?
could you get them to enlarge it, please?
Yes, of course. Can we enlarge it, please? The first page.
The first page.
We can see it's a special branch report from the 9th of June 95. It's in relation to the Justice for Brian Douglas campaign. He was a black man who died in custody after police batons were used. And at paragraph 1, we can see in relation to the campaign at this meeting on the 7th of June, about 60 people were present. It says half of them were black, and each speaker concentrated on the theme of increased police harassment and violence, and on the need to continue campaigns for justice after they'd fallen out of immediate public attention. Paragraph 2 goes on to note the race of the participants. At the meeting, and in the source comment.
Sorry, could you just...
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, I've read that, thank you.
Thank you. And then in the source comment, there's reference to a radical black element, the fact that the perceived fact that anti-police has become an anti-white issue. And that members were part of a militant black community. Is it fair to say that race is clearly a topic of discussion at the meeting itself, but why note the race of the participants, the speakers at the meeting? Why was the race of the people so important to the report?
I think I indicated yesterday in relation to special branch reporting, anything that takes place, say at a meeting or at a demonstration, it helps to build up an intelligence picture and helps to perhaps give some sort of judgment as to what might be happening on the streets later. I think this is just the way that Special Branch has always reported things, I believe quite properly. And I go back, it gives this indication of what's happening in our society.
And to what extent did the race of the campaigners affect the threat assessment of public disorder?
Does it not, can we just go back slightly, because does it not indicate that there's some radical black elements involved, and that this is now not just an anti-police but has become an anti-white issue? Well, if the police are out on demonstrations or just in their communities, I would hope that this gives the sort of community background or an understanding of what they might be faced if they come across, say, some young radical in this case, black elements, but there could be other elements.
We heard evidence from Lois Austin at the end of last year about this concept of anti-police campaigns and how that was represented in the SDS reports. And her evidence about that, and I'm summarising it, was that they weren't anti-police campaigns, they were anti-police harassment campaigns. So the fact that in those areas in South London, police were particularly picking up on black people on the streets, stops and searches were being disproportionately targeted towards black members of the community. So the way that it's presented as an anti-police campaign, would you accept that, at least Lois Austin's evidence was that they weren't against police, they were against bad policing?
I didn't have access. I haven't seen anything that Lois Austin has said about that. But all I can read is what is here, not just anti-police, but anti-white. It could well be that there are some concerns about policing on the streets.
And being in receipt of these, being in receipt of those reports that there's a large contingent in the community that are anti-police, would that make the police fear those campaigns, that they're anti-police?
I wouldn't have said, I appreciate what it does say there, I wouldn't have said the police would have feared them. The purpose of reporting in this way, and I'll repeat it, the purpose to report on things in this way is to give those who are responsible for policing, and hopefully, an overview and understanding of what they might be faced on during a particular demonstration or in a particular area of London.
Could this potentially lead to overzealous policing of such campaigns and demonstrations and marches, because the police, would they be told that these people are anti-police? Could that lead to more public disorder because of the police reaction to these campaigns?
I'm sorry, I just don't, I see what you're trying to say, but I go back to what I've said. All this, all this is going back, is to give the overview of a community, of a type of demonstration, of an area. Now, if that information is discussed beyond SDS, I can't tell you, I can't answer your question.
You have no control of what happens to this information once it leaves the SDS, does it?
Indeed not. But I would like to think that and go back again, I'd like to think that it gives the police an understanding of what they might be faced, and then perhaps have a way of dealing with it.
Peter Francis gave evidence in his witness statement at paragraph 155 that he felt conflicted about spying on black justice groups, and he said that he told you and Bob Lambert, in response to discussions about public order concerns following the death of Brian Douglas and Wayne Douglas, that the police should, and I quote, "stop fucking killing black people," end quote. Do you recall that happening? Do you have any recollection of something like that being said to you and or Bob Lambert?
I most certainly do not. No recollection whatsoever of that.
Do you recall him raising concerns about spying on black justice groups?
Not at all.
Can I ask you about the Joy Gardner campaign?
Okay.
Not long after you took up your post in the SDS, the deployment of Trevor Morris changed and he moved to Tottenham in January 1995. And this was around the time that the criminal proceedings against the police officers who killed Joy Gardner commenced. So Joy Gardner was the woman who was being detained for immigration removal purposes, and she was detained at the end of July 1993, and she died at the very beginning of August 1993. And if you recall, she was bound with quite barbaric equipment in order to restrain her, and Baron Condon came out and said that those restraints should never have been used by the police in the way that they were. Do you recall that incident?
I'm aware, as any ordinary person would have been. I was aware of it in the press, yes.
And so were you aware, was it a big part of the SDS focus when those police officers that were responsible for her death were tried, and it went to trial up in Tottenham? Around January 1995. Do you recall that happening? And there were demonstrations, weren't there, about those police officers?
I'm reminded now of, I don't recall, but I am reminded now of that.
Was part of the decision to redirect HN78, Trevor Morris, to Tottenham because of that trial?
I can't answer that in terms of, because I don't know that, what the reason was, but
would you have been? You'd have redirected him, would you?
I'd have been part of that decision, I'm sure, with Bob and other, yes, Bob and myself. But what I'm thinking is that, go back to what I keep saying about the role of SDS. If it's thought that certain areas or campaigns even, or protests would likely to cause public disorder, then that's why Trevor would have been asked to try and relocate. And it's clear, isn't it, that there was a lot of ill feeling about how Joy Gardner had been dealt with and her subsequent death. And I can truly understand why elements in society would be very concerned about it. But then we have to find out what would be the response on the streets.
The Justice for Joy campaign was obviously very active around that time. Was it recognised that that campaign was not violent? I can take you to some reports if that will help.
Yeah, if you're able to show me a report which says that the campaign wasn't violent, then I would certainly understand that. Sitting here today, I can't remember that. But I accept what you're saying if there is a document.
You say, as you've mentioned before, in your witness statement at paragraphs 233 to 234, you say that the concern was that although the campaigns might be legitimate, others might seek to use them for disorder. It's that sense, isn't it, that there may be other elements that may use the campaign as a reason to create disorder.
Well, you've put that far more eloquently than I've tried to this morning, but yes, that's exactly what the SDS are about.
In terms of summarising your evidence in relation to that, are there echoes of that in the evidence we've heard about the Stephen Lawrence campaign, that the campaign needed protecting? Was there a sense of that? Is that how you were approaching this, that the campaign needed protecting from political groups that might try to exploit it?
I wouldn't have used that term of protecting, but certainly I did, and I have said, haven't I, this morning, that it was the use of a legitimate campaign by other groups who want to foment problems on the streets.
The evidence of Baroness Lawrence and Dr. Lawrence was that they could manage their own campaign. They didn't need protecting by SDS undercover officers, and that they managed to quell disorder themselves as part of the campaign. So do you accept that a UCO in the midst of a campaign does not help to protect the campaign? Do you accept that in principle?
Well, I understand that Baroness Lawrence has said that they could cope, I think, with the campaign, but no, I don't really accept that it would be wrong to put an SDS officer close to some of the groups who are trying to foment trouble. I mean, Baroness Lawrence may have been successful, I can't remember, but Baroness Lawrence may have been successful in trying to keep some of the protesters away from the campaign itself. But we still had a responsibility to know if there were other groups or whether there were groups who were wanting to, in some way, get themselves involved in the campaign to cause problems on the streets of London.
Can I ask you about MPS 0245218? It's behind tab B156. This is a special branch report dated the 23rd of June 1995, and the report is on a meeting about the Joy Gardner police verdict. So this is the verdict that came out in relation to the police officers that were involved in the restraint of Miss Gardner. And if we can enlarge paragraph 1, please. We can see that what the meeting was about and why it had been called. And paragraph 2 onwards, what we can see, if we can highlight the whole of that, is that several people spoke at this meeting, and there's a short synopsis of what each of those speakers talked about and how they were feeling and what they were thinking. I don't propose that we read all of it now, but you can get the general gist of it. If we go on to page 2, please. You can see that it lists several people who spoke at this meeting. It notes the race, age, class, and the language that is used to talk about their politics and their interpretation of what has happened. Page 3, please, because I do want to take you to Myrna Simpson's entry and Bernie Grant, the MP, after her. So Myrna Simpson being Joy Gardner's mother, it sets out in some detail what her thinking was in relation to the whole event. A truly personal speech to Joy Gardner's mother, by Joy Gardner's mother, sorry. And would you accept that that is reporting Mr. Edmondson, just before the break, you were talking about how you raised HN78's concerns with DAC Howley. Do you want to just finish the point that you were making?
I think I'd actually come to the end of that. That was literally what I did.
Thank you.
Took it direct to Mr. Howley.
And do you know what ever came of that? Did you follow up with it with DAC Howley?
No, I didn't follow up with Mr. Howley.
Is it right that you considered those as the current racial tensions at the time? Did you recognise those as racial tensions in the community?
I'm sure I would have done.
And do you recall HN78, when he came to the end of his deployment, that he wrote a note, he says it in anticipation of his exfiltration, to pass on his experience and learning from his time in the field? And was that a report that you took up and passed up to your senior officers?
I don't know.
You don't recall anything about that?
Are we still talking about
HN78? Yes.
his name?
Trevor Morris.
All right,
yeah.
sorry, forgive
Yes.
me. Yep, okay, sorry.
I can show you the note. It's MPS 0245 303. It wasn't actually in the pack that was provided to you. It was in HN78's pack, but it may be something that you recognise.
Okay, okay.
So it's a note by HN78 that he thinks he probably prepared in anticipation of his exfiltration, and it sets out some of his experiences. He says in his witness statement that the report shows as signed off by the superintendent, and I cannot say whether this is a straight lift off my draft or whether it has been rewritten by the author. And I just wonder whether you can help us as to who that author might be, if you're able to say. It might be that you need to see the top of the page again. Is this the sort of special branch report that would be authored by you or one of the DSs in the SDS?
Very normally that would have been written up. I'm somewhat surprised actually, because I thought it had come direct, been written by Trevor, but it looks here as though it probably was written up as a final report by, I mean, forgive me, probably John Webb, because as you've heard, John did most of the writing.
And that's the sort of thing that would be passed up into special branch to the superintendent, is it?
I would like to think that that was the case. I think this is I can't remember reading it at the time, but having read it now, I think it's an excellent report. I think it's really important. As I'm sitting here now, looking at this, I'm thinking, this is quite a significant report coming from an officer who understands, because of his racial background, he understands what people in the community who are like him are feeling. And they're not perhaps the same feelings that people like me would have had the understanding of. I've read it more than once now, and I do think, great credit to Trevor for pulling that together, and whoever supported him in writing it up.
And do you have any sense of what likely would have happened to this report? How high up this would have gone? Is this something that would have gone back to DAC Howley or to the Commissioner? Can you help us with that?
I truly can't really help you at all with that.
We heard evidence earlier in this tranche by Karen Doyle, who was somebody that was involved with Movement for Justice, and she said that there were plenty of black people who were queuing up to advise the police in terms of how policing affected the black community. Did the Met Police really need an undercover officer to inform them of how policing might affect the black community in that way? Were there less intrusive means of getting that information to the police?
Well, I'm pleased to hear that there were other methods that they had, but I would certainly endorse everything that SDS were doing in this respect as well. I have no problem as a manager seeing that, thinking that we had an officer who was providing what I can really consider to be a valuable insight and hopefully supporting other areas of the police service.
Did it warrant, in your view, the collateral intrusion on those campaigns upon which he was reporting?
I'm going to say yes.
Can you see the effect that it has had on those people who were reported on and the upset it has caused? Because knowing that there was an undercover officer in their midst is deeply upsetting. And was it really worth having this officer in the midst of a campaign group in order to get this sort of information?
Again, I'm going to say yes.
Can I go back, please, to 1993 when Joy Gardner was killed? At the time, I suggest you were in CE squad. So this is the months, almost a year before you were engaged as manager in the SDS. Do you recall being involved in the reporting around Joy Gardner's death? Or will it help if I take you to the special branch file?
Please, yes.
Can we have up, please, MPS 0749776? So this is before your time as manager in the SDS. And it's a special branch file that was opened in relation to the Joy Gardner Memorial Campaign and the Justice for Joy Gardner campaign in the days after her death in 1993. Can you see that? Do you need that enlarged a bit? If I take you to page 173, please. And the handwritten notes at the bottom. Do you see on the top right, we've got the Chief Superintendent of CE is aware, and number 2, DCI Edmondson referred. And is it your handwriting on the left? DI blank aware, SBR to note, and PA on SWP file.
Excuse me.
Special Branch CE, 5th of August 93. Would that be your?
I think it is,
your
yes,
note?
yes.
So is it right that you were the DCI in Special Branch CE squad in the days following Joy Gardner's death in August 1993? Is that fair to?
Seemingly, yes, yes.
Thank you. And page 168, please. Paragraph 2. We can see here that it's a note about a threat assessment. So this is a memorandum on the 5th of August 93 from the Commander to the Chief Superintendent of CE Squad. in anticipation of a march or a protest on the 7th of August 1993. So in 2 days' time there will be a protest over Joy Gardner's death. May an urgent threat assessment be provided for this event? Do you see that?
I see it.
At the bottom. Thank you. If that can be taken, reduced down. I want to stay in this file. Page 165 to 166, please. We can see that this is the special branch threat assessment in relation to that protest on the 7th of August 1993. And it appears to have been authored by you, acting up as the superintendent in special branch on the 5th of August 1993. So that very day you write the threat assessment in relation to that protest of the Joy Gardner Fund. Is that right?
I would be quite surprised if I had been the author of this. I know it doesn't indicate an author.
Sorry, it does indicate an author.
Yeah. Okay, but I don't recall writing this report. I would be surprised if I had.
You would be surprised if
Yes,
you had?
I would.
Why is that?
Because I had other officers who would have provided that threat assessment.
Could you?
I might have put my name to it afterwards, but forgive me, I don't recall writing the report.
So it may be that you had an inspector or a DS who would write the threat assessment based on the information that was known at the time. You would sign that off, and that would go back to senior officers in special branch. Is that right?
That's normally the route. I can't tell just from this what would have happened, because I'm signing there as the superintendent, and normally, and I know you've all seen it, but then normally there's a minute sheet or something which then indicates onward transmission. I mean, there's no reason to ask for a threat assessment and then not forward it to the customer.
Just looking at paragraph 2, there's reference to Bernie Grant MP, suggesting that local indicators are best placed to record tensions. What does it mean by that? Is that local police officers would be best placed to assess the situation, or?
And obviously it's a while since I was involved in policing in this respect, but I would like to think that at every police station there would have been some form of local community liaison, and I think that's what this is referring to.
So they would be a source of information for special branch. We can see that in paragraph 3, the groups likely to attend the protest are listed there. And it's expected that about... this is in relation to an event that had already happened. So
yes.
in 2 days after her death, there was a small protest outside Hornsey Police Station where 30 to 40 people were in attendance, both from the SWP, the ARA and the WRP and CAM, the Campaign Against Militarism. And then going on to paragraph 4.
Could you just stop for a moment?
Yes, of course.
Only because I'm trying to, because this is a report, isn't it? This is a threat assessment.
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm just trying, and you just showed me this paragraph 3. I'm trying to see what relevance 3 has got to a threat assessment. So can I just read that again?
Yes, of course. Essentially, I think it's just that there has already been a hastily arranged protest.
Oh, I see. But yes, we're indicating in the threat assessment that there has been a previous activity supporting the campaign. Yeah, I get it now. Sorry.
And then it was anticipated that
And
there'd be
then-
one in another couple of days.
Yeah. Which
where-
would give an indication could give an indication of what to expect. Yep.
And the groups who have indicated an interest in the protest that is to come include
Yeah.
YRE and the Hackney Community Defence Association.
Okay.
And it's noted none of the groups who will be present has the ability or desire to cause widespread disorder. Although they will be noisy and aggressive in tone throughout, these groups will total approximately 400 to 500 protesters. So it was known then at the time that these groups, the YRE and HCDA, didn't have the ability or desire to cause widespread disorder. That's right, isn't it?
That's what it's indicating there, yes.
And
And,
this is-
then it does go on, doesn't it, to say they will be noisy and aggressive in tone throughout.
But a protest being aggressive is part of the course, in large part, isn't it?
Well, that may be the case, but the threat assessment should actually offer that information anyway. This is what the indication, this is what the purpose of a threat assessment is. It gives it a holistic view. So, yeah,
Is it right, though, that noting that YRE and HCDA are not organisations that are likely to cause widespread disorder, that was known by you before you took management of the SDS? Is that fair to say?
sorry, can we just read this again? Because I'm trying
Yes.
to get it the context, because you've asked me about my understanding of YRE, and I thought that they were a group that were prepared to cause public disorder. Although I appreciate what it's saying, they've expressed the interest here. That's what it's saying. They've just expressed an interest.
That's right.
None of the groups who will be present. Okay, so if it's saying that those groups are the ones being present, it's saying that I appreciate what it's saying, that they had the ability or desire on this occasion, I've put that word in, or the words in, to cause widespread disorder.
Yes.
But I'm sorry, if Youth Against Racism, if that's the first indication I've had of them, and I can't remember, that would indicate from that the ability or desire not to cause disorder, but noisy and aggressive. Okay.
that they don't have the ability or desire to cause widespread disorder.
It certainly says that.
And that is in the month before Peter Francis is deployed, who ultimately infiltrates YRE. Is that right? It was known by Special Branch that YRE were not in a position to be causing widespread disorder even before Peter Francis infiltrated them. Is that right?
Saying here, I actually can't be certain here, because it's certainly saying that the YRE, and it mentions the others, it said none of the groups, so presumably it means none of the three mentioned who will be present has ability or desire to cause widespread disorder. Well, I can only go by what that threat assessment said at that time about that group.
And
But I didn't, because I wasn't on SDS, and I don't know what SDS thinking was around YRE, because it's certainly, well, we'll have to come on to that perhaps later. But yes, I have to accept what you're saying there for the moment.
and HN15, who deployed under your management into HCDA, did you not think back to this assessment and think, well, HCDA are a group who doesn't have the ability or desire to cause widespread disorder? Why were you deploying HN15 into that organisation? Doesn't say this occasion.
Oh, sorry. Well, you'll have to forgive me here. I understand what that threat assessment says in, I think, 1993, but I don't know what else was in the minds of SDS and at that time, and certainly by the time I moved into SDS, it certainly could only have been something which said that we needed to have somebody monitoring this organisation, or whichever organisation he was pointed to learn about the potential for public disorder. There's two things for me there.
Looking at paragraph 7, please. You can see these groups see this event as the latest opportunity to protest against the establishment in general and the police service in particular as part of their individual ongoing campaigns on racial issues. None of these groups, with the exception of those highlighted, would have any desire to turn this unfortunate event into a cause célèbre for widespread disorder. The situation continues to be closely monitored and any developments will be communicated immediately. In terms of those groups that are highlighted, are those the ones in paragraph 5? It may be that we need to reduce that and highlight the whole page. So it's suggesting that maybe anarchists or Panther UK might be looking to use it as a vehicle, but not YRE, not HCDA. Is that fair?
That's what that report is indicating, yes.
Was the reason that these groups were targeted, in particular YRE and HCDA, because of their links to black justice campaigns and not because of their capacity for public disorder?
I can only say at the time I moved into SDS, that was my understanding that there was that potential that they offered. I know that says there, but that was the threat assessment for that demonstration or that march. That doesn't necessarily follow that that would have been what they were like all the time. And obviously someone has made the decision that they do have that potential.
Can I ask you about page 169, please? It's an Evening Standard article dated the 6th of August 1993. So this is just 3 days after Joy died. And the article in the Evening Standard the day after your threat assessment, or whoever wrote the threat assessment with your name at the bottom of it, was drafted. Did Special Branch pass any information about the Joy Gardner campaign and the threat of SWP protests to the press?
To the press?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely not.
Do you know why this article would be contained within the Special Branch file?
Merely because it makes reference to SWP.
Was the communication around the Joy Gardner campaign a two-way traffic between CE desk, SDS, and further up the chain? Were you communicating both with HN86 in SDS and your senior officers up the chain? How far, and if so, how far did that go?
I don't recall this. I don't recall that toing and froing, as you're putting it.
Baron Condon, in his Ellison interview, said that, and I can bring that up, it's UCPI 3255, page 20. Page 20, lines 6 to 9. It says that August was a very tense, and I remember there was an Evening Standard editorial that said the feeling was that London was hours away from major riots, so the Joy Gardner case had far more significance and prominence at that point of the year than tragically Stephen's death, referring to Stephen Lawrence. Were you aware at that point of the significance of Joy Gardner's death and the interest that that had for the Commissioner?
I'd be surprised if you, as an SB officer, that I wouldn't have been aware of the importance of the death, yes, because it caused a lot of consternation within the local community. I understand that.
So was there pressure coming from above in relation to getting information about the Joy Gardner campaign?
No, forgive me here, I've not said that. I think you're just asking me, was there pressure? Certainly, there was no pressure on me to get intelligence about the campaign. There would have definitely been pressure on Special Branch and perhaps, I hope, SDS to obtain intelligence about the possibility of groups using the campaign to foment serious public disorder.
Can we go back, please, to that Special Branch report, to page 109? It was MPS 0749776. Page 109, please. Oh, sorry. We can see here the date is the 5th of October 93 now, and it's a report about a vigil held in memory of Joy Gardner. About 40 participants, including Bernie Grant, MP, again, reporting his involvement in the campaign. No arrests, no disorder. Taking that down, please, can you see at the bottom we've got your name, number 1, bullet point number 1, DCI Edmondson, aware, and I think then that's your writing as to who should see it, signed off with your initials, SBCE, on the 5th of the 10th, 93.
Yeah, that's my writing, yes.
Is that right? So you're looking at this report on the vigil, yes, and sending that on. Why send that on? What public order value did that have, given that there was no arrest, no disorder? It's purely the family vigil, or a vigil for Joy, whoever wanted to attend, a very sensitive, personal event. Why was that forwarded?
Well, it's an event on the streets. It may have been a peaceful event, but it's still something that took place. SB always report on, or tries to report on such things. I've sent it through to number 3. I think that's it says 86, so I've sent it through to 86. This is background information for him and SDS to see, to know, to understand, get a feeling for what's going on. And this is all part of SB work.
But why did SB need to have a feeling and know the details of vigil? It's got no public order value at all at this stage.
This particular vigil, by reading it now, didn't cause any public order issues, as reported. But I think it's important from an SB perspective to have an understanding of what's going on the streets of London. And if that includes a relatively peaceful, or a peaceful picket or vigil, that's fine. But it's background work. This is intelligence work. I'm sorry, this is what we try to bring together, a picture of what's going on within London.
And there were no boundaries to that?
Well, you'll have to provide something that says to me, oh, why did you do that? Where's the boundary here? This is...
Can we have a look at page 101, please? This is a report dated the 17th of the 12th. It's a telephone message that has come in. Your name down at the bottom again, signed off on the 20th of the 12th, 93. And we can see that it's in relation, if we can highlight the text of the report, it's in relation to the funeral that took place of Joy Gardner. Approximately 120 mourners present, again including Bernie Grant MP, various other people. No disorder. Surely that does not have any public order implications and should not find its way onto a special branch report. Is that not something that's crossed the boundary?
From a special branch perspective, I would say no. All that, for me, there, looking at that now, is this is tying together all the loose ends around a particular issue. And that's all it does. It's not trying to implicate anybody in any wrongdoing. It's just, again, special branch background information tying together events regarding the Joy Gardner issue.
Peter Francis, in his witness statement, I don't need to bring it up, but for reference, it's paragraph 514, says, in respect of information that could have been used to smear a justice campaign, I gave the example of Joy Gardner to Ellison during my interview, as this was the example given to me by HN86 when tasking me to report on the Lawrence family campaign. Joy Gardner was killed by the police and had no criminal record whatsoever. However, within the SDS, it was picked up that she had been very violent to her boyfriend. That information was filtered out, including to the media, and featured in a number of news reports. And he goes on at paragraph 975, during one of our car journeys, when I was still in the back office, I asked HN86 to give me an example of the kind of information I was expected to report about the Lawrence family campaign. He gave me the example of Joy Gardner, as I explained at paragraph 514. Is it realistic that Peter Francis was in fact asked to get whatever information he could find on the campaign, because there were no boundaries as to what information would be useful for Special Branch in painting the picture of the people involved in the campaigns that were of such interest to the Metropolitan Police in 1993, 1994?
Well, firstly, let me say, I find it reprehensible that again he's used that word smearing. In my time and my recollection with senior colleagues, there was never, ever an intention to smear, use of that term, smear anybody. I have already indicated that because the campaigns that may produce some issues in relation to public order, then it would have been the responsibility for Special Branch to obtain information just to provide background knowledge of how to progress should that be necessary. But I really find it reprehensible that he continues to use words like smearing. That's never, ever heard, never crossed my mind
to
or
be
my
fair
bounds.
to Peter Francis, though, he's qualified what smear means, and it's not making things up. It is just collecting information, any information. And I think in your evidence you have accepted that there are no boundaries. Any information would make its way onto a Special Branch report.
There are
Is he right in that?
certainly some of the reporting that you've shown me that would have gone on to, I think, would have gone on to SB records.
What would be the effect of any negative information about the Lawrence family had it been reported? Would that have remained on file?
I think I'd be surprised if something like negative about well, there wasn't a negative about the family, but comments around perhaps things that have been happening might have got onto a record, but it's never I keep saying this, there's never the intention to find anything derogatory which would help smear people like the Lawrences as an example, or even Joy Gardner.
Can I ask you about the Ibrahim Say Memorial, please? It's behind tab MPS 0246102. This is in relation to the Ibrahim Say Memorial Campaign March and Picket on the 23rd of March 1996. So this is a report during the course of your tenure as manager of the SDS. It's a march from Forest Gate to Ilford Police Station. Ibrahim Say had been unlawfully killed by police on the 16th of March 1996 when officers restrained him and sprayed him with CS spray at Ilford Police Station. Do you recall that event and the campaign that followed?
I'm afraid I don't. No, I don't recall that at all.
Do you recall authoring this report, or is this something that might have been authored by a DS or an officer in the back office and you'd have put your name to it? I'll give you a moment to read it.
If I may,
Yeah.
In fact, could you, first page, just slightly larger for me,
Yes.
please? I've read that page.
Thank you. Can we have the next page up? There is another part to it.
Thank you.
Can you see that in the source comment, no disorder, as a result of police restraint and effective stewarding, no disorder to report. Can I draw your attention, though, to the beginning of this report, because it's effectively a detailed description of a peaceful march where speeches are made and the race, religion and political identities of attendees are reported on. Why would that detail be important?
I look upon this as just what I've said a few times now. This is special branch reporting and has been for many years.
Paragraph 3 says that the Black Power salute was given with some feeling. The theme at this point was that police were murderers and that Say was just one on a growing list of black victims of police brutality. The suggestion that it's a theme denotes perhaps some either sarcasm or disbelief. It's not a theme, it's a serious issue that people are protesting about. In terms of the language that's being used, was it not really believed that they had a legitimate reason to be angry and protesting at what was happening? What's the sense? Why use words like the theme of the march?
Forgive me, this is just the author's use of language. It may not be the best use of a word, but I would have read that and thought I don't think theme is wrong to say that. Looking at that report. Again, I will just reiterate, this is special branch reporting of an event that took place and what we should be aware of within the community.
Does it denote in any way that there is no police racism? That's what protesters are complaining about, but this theme of police being murderers, or in the wider sense of police being racist, it's not believed by police. It's not believed by the people who are writing up the reports. Was that true? In the 1990s?
Police officers. Are you saying that the police officers who wrote the report do not think that the police were murderers?
Yeah.
Well, I probably agree with that. I don't think the police thought of themselves as murderers.
And the police wouldn't think of themselves as racist?
Again, probably not. But what's important out of this, it's not what the police are thinking, it's what the community is thinking. And by providing intelligence around what the community is thinking, I would hope that would go some way to supporting the police and how they deal with things. And I think it's quite clear at the end where the source is saying, because the police acted with restraint, even though one officer was abused merely because he was black and bottle was thrown, but it still said the police were restrained. I'm sorry, I think what you're trying to indicate is wrong.
In your witness statement, paragraph 112, you say you didn't witness any racism or sexism whilst in the SDS. Is that potentially because you were a white male, and any racism or sexism was a blind spot for you?
No, again, no. No, I would say not. Obviously, I'm a white chap. I'm not going to get abused by white people. Of course I'm not. But I did not also see or hear any racially motivated comments within the SDS. Not at all. I mean, Trevor was a really good egg. He was somebody that we got on. He was one of our good officers, one of our respected officers. I'm sorry, I just think you're trying to say that there was this racism within SDS, and I'm categorically saying I've never experienced any of that while the time I was there.
Do you recognise that it's not, in terms of institutional racism, is not just about how the individual black person is treated, but also about the decisions that are made to focus on black justice campaigns and report on them, seeing them as a potential threat? Was that something that you considered at the time?
Well, I did not consider that it was institutionally wrong to provide intelligence on any campaigns, irrespective of what they were about. That was, again, the SB/SDS role. It's not institutionally motivated in any way.
Mr. Edmondson, I want to move on more to some of the other areas of deployments during the course of your management tenure. Can I ask, please, that tab B76 MPS 0527239 is brought up, please. Page 2. This, I think, is a presentation that you give to Commander Ops Donald Buchanan at the time. It may help if we go to the bottom of the page to see your name. It's quite a long document. Effectively, it's your presentation to Mr. Buchanan about the potential recruits that are coming in that are coming into the SDS, and we can see that you've signed it off at the bottom. You're proposing 3 candidates. It includes HN26, DC Jenner, and DC Boiling. And we can see up at the top in the note, the minute of the note, is that it's addressed to Acting Chief Superintendent HN33. Through the Acting Superintendent HN41, who is in open, actually. He's an open officer, Matthew Dwyer. Do you remember him?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I know Matt Dwyer.
So was that the normal course of events, that it was the Commander Ops, Mr. Buchanan, who would have the final say in terms of who was going to be recruited to the SDS, and these other officers would see exactly the type of person that was being recruited as part of the process?
That seems to be the way that we conducted this, yes.
How much input did they actually give in practice in terms of SDS recruitment and targeting of those officers?
Right, sorry. Who are you referring to?
Mr. Buchanan in particular,
Yeah.
but also any of the other senior officers.
Mr. Dwyer?
Mr. Dwyer.
Yeah.
And the Acting Chief Superintendent HN337, who is a closed officer.
Could I just...
Well, yes, of course, yeah. He's not a closed officer, but he has anonymity.
Right, okay. I think I know who that is. I'm just... So what, forgive me again, go over, what are you actually asking of me here? I mean, this is... Oh,
Yeah. In terms of recruitment, how involved were those senior officers?
in terms of, are you talking about in terms of the presentation that or determining whether they're suitable for SDS?
Yeah. Is that the extent of it? You would present the proposed new recruit and they would say yay or nay, but that essentially was the extent of it.
They would, I'm sure they would have offered some comment. I can't think they wouldn't have done, but at some stage, and perhaps then they would have, if they had disagreed, and we would perhaps have to rethink it. But I think, really, looking at this, I'm trying to get behind what you're asking me. Preparations are made. We've done all the background work on the chaps. They've been interviewed and all the things that go on within the office, and then a decision is made to offer a number of people, 1, 2, 3, up the chain to more senior people who will ask questions of us, I'm sure, and I'm really don't recall this happening. I know that it must have done because I see I've said I've submitted a report to the commander. However, I don't recall doing this, but it will have happened, and I'm sure each of them, knowing them, would have asked what they consider to be pertinent questions, and I'm sure if they'd have agreed with that, then we'd have put the presentation to Mr. Buchanan, and then I suspect that would be the final decision.
And how much say, if any, would they have in terms of the targeting of these officers?
No, targeting is slightly different because targeting is to do with what the requirement is on any of the squads. And the squads would be offering their requirement. Do you have, we'd be interested in this area of activity. Are you able to support that? So that's what the targeting, as I remember it, would be about.
Okay. So targeting much more contained within the SDS, and you would be liaising with the desks before deciding where these people were deployed. It would be,
again, all targeting would have had to have been, for a squad, would have had to come eventually from the chief superintendent of the squad, would have agreed. But that would have been something, each of the like B squad, if they'd had a requirement, their desks would have put their heads together and they'd have gone up to their boss and their boss to our boss and then back down to us saying B squad has a requirement for a targeting in this organisation. Are you able to provide that intelligence for us? So, and if it was accepted, then we would then have to see whether we had somebody that we could point towards that organisation.
Okay. And when you're saying it goes up to their boss and their boss, what level of
it would start in terms of the decision to what requirement would go up to the chief superintendent of the squad.
I see. Yeah.
And they would make this, would agree with advice from all their teams what is required within the squad. The chief superintendent agrees or not, but if he agrees, I'm sure that then gets discussed. It may be discussed at what the most senior meetings that they had. Chief superintendents and commanders would have, listen, this is off the top of my head now, but probably weekly meetings to discuss various things.
But generally speaking, there'd be quite a bit of input and knowledge about where people were being deployed, the UCOs in the SDS.
Yes, I would. In my time, certainly, yes.
In terms of then your role in meeting with the officer before they're deployed to make sure that they were content, they knew what they were getting themselves in for, and the spouses, did you tend to go to the homes and meet with the wives and husband of those officers that were deployed?
My recollection is that I did on each of those officers that had been put forward while I was, from when I started.
Do you recall specifically whether you went to meet Mark Jenner and his wife at their home before he was deployed? Because her evidence is that she remembers Bob Lambert, but she doesn't recall that you attended.
Okay. I have to say, if that's the case, I don't have that recollection. What I've just said to you earlier was I thought it was part of my role to go to each of the spouses prior to deployment. But if she's saying she doesn't remember, maybe on that occasion I didn't.
In Bob Lambert's evidence last week, he said it was a deliberate decision not to raise the issue of sex at that interview, and that in hindsight it was wrong. Is that your position as well, that you chose not to raise the issue of sex at these preliminary meetings with the officer and their spouse?
I think it's right to say that we probably, because each individual meeting is different, but I think it's probably right to say that we touched on everything, but not specifically on sexual activity. That's probably right, but we tried to outline as much as we could about the pressures without actually referring to sex. I think Bob's probably right on that. And sorry, and you just said, and I will agree with what you just said, although you've probably forgotten, but thinking back 30 years later, yes, some of that should have been discussed as well.
Mr. Jenner's ex-wife, says that she felt duped in hindsight, that she didn't have sufficient evidence or sufficient information to be able to give an informed decision as to whether she wanted to support her husband going into the SDS as an undercover officer. Bob Lambert, in his evidence last week, accepted that in effect he had duped S. Do you also accept that those spouses were not given sufficient evidence to be able to make an informed decision and were in effect duped into being an anchor?
I was told, but you've just told me that I wasn't at Mrs. Jenner's meeting, so I can't say whether Bob duped her. I would never have intended in any of my discussions with them and done anything to dupe them. That's absolutely no, that irrefutably. However, I will acknowledge from my recollection that we probably should have touched on the possibilities that they would have come across some sort of sexual sort of pressures. And we probably didn't touch on that. But I from my own knowledge, and that of course is knowledge I've gleaned by talking to SDS officers in the field, I would have given all the spouses as much as I possibly could.
And because of these undercover operations impacting in the way that it did on spouses, predominantly in relation to women, they were more negatively impacted. Do you recognise that that is a form of misogyny, in that failure by omission to provide information to the women that would be able to allow them to have a more informed decision-making process? It was misogynistic in the way that it impacted negatively upon them.
Forgive me, I don't recognise that terminology in relation to how I dealt with any of the spouses. Obviously, the partner. Some were were men partners as well, but I know that's not misogynistic. But no, I would never have approached it in a misogynistic way.
Although not by intent, do you recognise that by omission they have been negatively impacted?
I can't really say that I agree with what you're saying there. The whole of the operation probably negatively impacted on them in some way.
Can I move on to HN1 and his attendance at court? It's behind tab B78, MPS 0526756. This is a report of the 22nd of April 1994. And we can see in the first paragraph, HN1 appeared at the Magistrates' Court. And it suggested that, importantly, he did not breach current SDS policy guidelines regarding participation in crime. We looked at those yesterday.
Yes.
And part of that was appearing at the Magistrates' Court as a defence witness. Is it right that, in fact, because he attended court in his undercover identity, he was, in fact, breaching the SDS guidelines in that he was misleading the court?
I've had to think long and hard about this because I know it was raised with me. I now will say I do not consider that the court was misled, because in my mind the court was dealing with an offence. It had a named or named people in front of it. It dealt with those people in the names it was given, and the court dealt with those people in the way that the court decided to. I do not consider that by using his old cover name is actually misleading the court.
That was the approach, was it, of the SDS under your management, that attending court in any capacity under false identity was not misleading the court? Again,
I would say that every case would be dealt with independently. We would have to give careful thought to it. But in relation to this case that you're showing me here, I still now don't think, I do disagree. I do not think we were misleading the court merely because a different name was used.
Do you accept that that is contrary to the SDS policy guidelines on participation in crime?
But that doesn't relate to me. To my mind, it didn't relate to a SDS being arrested and appearing at a court. And that's what I believed at the time.
They were the SDS guidelines, though, weren't they?
No, weren't they? I think you were talking about general special branch guidelines, were they not?
I think they were SDS guidelines. No. Bring those up in. I'll get the reference for you and we'll have a look at them again. We can see at page 11 HN1 also attended court in his cover name in November. And and he acted as a defence witness for a leading Animal Liberation Front activist, LTD. So that's in relation to this particular appearance. And then on Thursday, the 9th of November, the same officer, so HN1, will be attending Bishop Auckland Magistrates Court to answer a summons alleging threatening behaviour during the course of a demonstration against grouse shooting on the 12th of August 1995. So that's in relation to his own defence case. So on two separate occasions, in two separate courts, he was appearing as a defence witness for LTD, and then he was also appearing in his own capacity, charges against him in Bishop Auckland Magistrates Court. In both cases, this paragraph 3, the officer has been suitably advised as to his course of conduct and reminded of the relevant guidelines. Page 3, going back to page 3 now, this is a composite of different reports in relation to the same court appearances. But at paragraph 4.1, sorry, maybe the page just before. No, next page. Sorry, it's a different document. It's a related document. Apology. It's B170 MPS 0526755, please. This is in relation to the Section 5 charge that was against HN1. Page 3, please. In relation to events up in North Yorkshire. And we can see here that it's reported that all defendants will be jointly represented by a sympathetic lawyer with a view to pleading not guilty. In terms of reporting the intention of his co-defendants, was there any concern that you had about reporting of LPP material or information?
Not in this case, no.
Paragraph 4.2,
Not that I read
please.
that, sorry, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Just reading that.
Okay, the defendant's intentions as to how to plead would not strike you as information taken by a lawyer for the purposes of a criminal case.
Well, it's the defendants who are deciding to plead not guilty.
So it doesn't strike you as something that shouldn't be making its way into a special branch report?
Even now it doesn't.
Paragraph 4.2, please. It says, in the circumstances, it's recommended that he proceeds with a view to entering a plea of not guilty at the appropriate time.
Pleading guilty.
Entering a plea of not guilty.
You've talked about 4.
Oh, sorry, last sentence.
Sorry, let me read on then, please. Right, so now I read it. Okay.
Sorry, yes, I can see what part you were reading. The intention was, as his manager, to allow him to continue with a course of proceedings plead not guilty at the appropriate time and effectively let the proceedings take their course. Is that right?
That would certainly be the case there by the look of that, yes.
No concerns then that HN1 was misleading the court in that way?
Not in that respect, no.
In terms of the guidelines, I have the reference now. It's
Thank you.
MPS 0748350 behind tab B79. So the title is the SDS Policy Guidelines Regarding Participation in Crime. And it's, does that need to be enlarged?
Please, as I can't read that. Thank you.
And it's over the page, page 2.
I'm down to B at the moment.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
over the page. So firstly, the officer shouldn't really be becoming involved in crime unless it's absolutely essential. And it's bullet point E. At no time will an SDS officer commit himself or herself to a course to mislead a court. So I suggest that that is exactly what HN1 was doing, and that could include appearing on behalf of a defendant as a witness. So not only appearing as a defendant himself, but also appearing as a witness for a defendant. Do you accept that the action that he was advised to take was contrary to the SDS policy?
By the look of that, yes, it's against that particular E. It
And so
could include appearing on behalf. Yep, okay.
And so why wasn't policy followed in relation to your officers attending court?
But which court are we now referring to?
In either situation that HM1 found himself in, either at the magistrates as a defendant himself or as a defence witness for LTD.
Well, if I was the one who gave him the authority to do that, then yes, it looks as though that's against E in that respect. But
Was it thought that the policies and guidelines and the law didn't apply to SDS officers?
no, I don't believe that is the case. But I think always as well, it was in one of the other documents that you've shown me, something about the security of his operation and his own security. But I'm a little concerned about who gave him. Am I the one who gave him that authority not to? To go to court.
If we go back to MPS 0526756, which is the report behind tab B78. This is something you were dealing with at the very outset when you were first arriving as a manager, because it's the 22nd of April, and you'd only taken over in that month. We can see that you've signed it off there as the SDS DCI.
Again, sorry, but thank you.
So this is, you're sending this information up to HN 337. And is it right that HN 337 was on board with that as well? That
Forgive me again, just a moment.
yes.
Oh, right, okay. Well, certainly in respect of that, yes.
And if we go to...
None of that, at the moment, none of that is in breach of anything.
If we go to MPS 0732480, please. Can we see this is now the matter of HN it doesn't say it on this page. I'll take you to the next page, but it's really. Sorry, if we can just keep that on the screen as well.
Yeah.
We can see you've signed it off here. It's in relation to HN1's arrest. It's been sent up to HN337, the OCU commander, through Eric Docker, the superintendent. You can see it's in relation to HN1's appearance.
Right, could you just give me a moment to
Yep.
read it then, please? Right, I'm moving over the page. Right, okay, thank you.
So whilst the summons in relation to his own case of Section 5 charge against him was withdrawn by Bishop Auckland Magistrates Court, the case in relation to LTD was to go up to appeal, the one in which he appeared as a defence witness. And there seems to be no concern either by you, Eric Docker, or Superintendent HN337, the operation commander, in relation to his involvement in these court appearances in his undercover identity. Was it the sense that this, far from being contrary to policy, was actually good for his cover operation and therefore not seen as a problem at all?
Certainly reading this, I would agree with what you've just said. You know, I mean, it's been through a number of people. Been referred through. No.
But you don't accept that that's contrary to policy. Is that your evidence?
Well, it seems it's been accepted all the way through that it's this business of contrary to policy that in the very strict way that I've seen it presented, and you could say that was contrary, but I think what we've tried to do there is indicate that I'm not involved really in that one, but there was no intention to mislead a court. The court was still dealing with a case. It had named people in front of it. If one of the people using a name was using a wrong name, is that actually misleading the court? I have to say I don't think it is.
Was it the situation that the golden rule, operational security, trumped all other considerations?
It's it as a golden rule, but it doesn't trump absolutely everything. It wouldn't have done. Every case would have had to been looked at on its own merits.
Can I ask you about the Chitty case? Do you remember Chitty being one of the officers that you had to deal with?
Before we move on to that, can I just
Yes, of course.
take up something in relation to the topic you've been asking about? Could you put up MPS 0748350? Could you put up MPS 0748350? Page 2, please. Look at the sentence at the foot of the page, please. It doesn't look as though that was done in this case.
No, it doesn't, sir. You're right.
Was there a reason for that?
I can't answer that. And he said, I don't know.
Put bluntly, unless the court is told about the identity of the witness giving evidence before them, they are going to be misled. To take this example, if the court had known that it was a police officer giving evidence in support of a defendant about an incident which he had witnessed, would that not have assisted the court?
So the court is, I appreciate, but the court is, I don't see what the court would gain by knowing that one of the people in front of them was an undercover police officer, because all the evidence it's being given would not have changed in any way. They have a man in front of them who is either pleading guilty or whatever, or giving evidence, but the fact that he is an undercover officer doesn't alter in any way. This is the way I'm thinking. Doesn't alter in any way the evidence, the truth of the evidence that he or she is giving.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Mike Chitty case. Do you remember that in May 1994? Again, you were dealing with that disciplinary case very shortly after you first arrived on the SDS. He was an officer who was reported as a missing person with concerns that he had made an attempt on his life. Upon resurfacing, he made serious allegations about Bob Lambert's involvement in the securing of prosecutions for the Debenhams incendiary device campaign. Do you recall dealing with Mike Chitty in that disciplinary capacity?
Do you know, I don't. I have to say I don't, unless you can now show me something where I've been involved. I know of the Chitty case.
If I can show you MPS.
But if you show me something.
Yeah, 0726956, please. It's an SDS discussion paper. If we just go to the next page, please. This is the discussion paper about the Chitty case. A report written by Bob Lambert and including current policy and practice. If we can go to page 18, please. Paragraph 2.10 effectively says that all officers in animal rights admit to having formed close relationships with activists. And there's much anecdotal evidence to suggest that the same is true in the anarchist field. Hence the importance of selecting officers who are strong-minded and loyal with the advantage of stable personal relationships. So those extracts from that paragraph, those references to relationships, the need for strong, stable personal relationships, is that a thinly veiled reference to intimate sexual relationships amongst UCOs on duty in the animal rights and anarchist fields? Did you read it like that?
No, I don't read it like that. No, I don't. I know that one of the concerns, and HM1, certainly on more than one occasion, probably, but certainly I recall speaking to him about close friendships, and he said one of the issues that he had to face constantly in many ways was the fact that there was a lot of sympathy with what the activists were trying to do in a legal, peaceful way. And HM1 said, my difficulty is that I sometimes feel I'm betraying friends.
So it was a purely friendship that you thought he was talking about? That's how I understood,
yeah.
Did you know that Mike Chitty had returned to his returned to the field after his deployment had finished? He'd returned to the field and had engaged in a relationship that he had with a woman known to the inquiry as Lizzie. You might want to look on your cipher list to see who that is.
Sorry, what am I looking for?
The name Lizzie. Or do you understand that he returned and had a relationship with a woman at all? Do you recall that?
Again, I'm sorry, sitting here today, I can remember very little of the Chitty case. Now, I appreciate it seems that I must have been just around or starting at about the time that that case was continuing, but I don't recall my part in that Chitty affair. Now, if I had a part, then forgive me, I don't remember it. Sitting here again, if you, as in the past I've had, someone shows me a document, it perhaps would reflect, but I don't recognise much of this here.
Page 19, please. Paragraph 2.12. You can see there's reference to DS Chitty's marriage. Managers and colleagues had several indications during his tour of duty, however, that he intended to seek a divorce. And towards the end it says, thus he appears to have had no real emotional counterbalance to the temptation to return secretly to the warmth of a close female associate in the animal rights movement. That's Bob Lambert writing this report about Mike Chitty returning to the sexual relationship that he had in the field post-deployment. Do you remember that has been a real issue that you had to deal with in the first couple of months of you taking over management of the SDS?
Again, I'm sorry, but I don't recall it being an issue that I had to deal with. No, I appreciate, you've just said I was the DCI there, but I don't recall this,
okay.
Taking this sort of prominent role in this at all.
Page 28, please. Paragraph 3.5. Says, during his official tour of duty, DS Chitty was romantically attached to a number of women within the South London animal movement. In fact, it was a standing joke amongst activists that SLAM was more of a dating service than a viable campaigning group. By mid-1986, he was known to be a close associate of Lizzie. would you have read this report, this discussion report about Mike Chitty? Would you have read it, and would you have read this part of the report?
I'm sure I would have, as I say, I'm sure I was given information about the Chitty affair. I'm sure that papers, again, coming into the office, I tried to read as much as I could. So while I don't believe I had a part to play whatsoever in that discipline role, it would be unusual for me not to have read those papers. I'm just going to check on something, if I may. Sorry, I was just trying to see whether that was any relevance about TN 0026, but I don't see the cipher here. So.
It's not relevant for the question that I want to pose to you. If we can just bring up paragraph 3.6 and 3.7, please. Can you see that here it says, no doubt Lizzie is not the only woman to shed a tear when Mike Blake, lover and sometimes fellow Slam activist, left England for the USA in May 1987. And that at the end of paragraph 3.7, it says Lizzie had got Blake out of her system after a passionate affair and was now emotionally upset having to cope with his unexpected return. D.S. Chitty has told the writer, that being Bob Lambert, that at this point he, as Blake, made an offer of marriage to Lizzie, which she pondered before declining. If you'd have read this, it's obvious, isn't it, that this was a sexual relationship that an undercover officer had engaged in. And so, did that strike you at all? Is this ringing any bells?
The whole of the Chitty affair itself is sort of notoriety within SDS.
And did that give you cause for concern about putting measures in place so that that wouldn't happen again with the officers that you were managing? Because, Mr. Edmondson, my point is, from the very start of your deployment, your management, it was a known risk that UCOs were having relationships with members of the public in the field. Is that right?
What I would say just here is that I think Chitty really is a serious one-off event, and so that's one part of it. It's not, to me, this is not normal SDS or even former SDS activity. Quite extraordinary, really, what he did. But I think what you're trying to again say, and we go back to what information I may or may not have given to spouses.
No, not really. That's not the point I'm trying to make. It's that you were aware that a UCO was having sexual relationship in the field. Is that right?
Now, from this, yes.
Right. And that was right at the very start of your management?
That was the whole of the Chitty affair. Okay. Very, very specifically, for me, at that time, a very unique affair.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah, note the time.
We'll resume at 2:05.
Thank you.